4 months of bipartisan talks to come up with a deal on border policy and foreign aid, a 370-page bill, and less than 48 hours after it was released.
The good news is this bill is dead.
Last year, Republicans demanded legislation to stop the flood of migrants seeking asylum at the southern U.S. border. But when a bipartisan bill was released in the Senate earlier this month, they rejected it.
We got a supplemental funding proposal with immigration provisions. It's not a border security bill.
We have no real chance here to make a law.
I guess that's it. The politics changed.
And it's not the first time. Here's why good faith attempts at border legislation routinely fall victim to the issue's difficult politics. Immigration has been a divisive issue in American politics for decades. And in recent years, there's been a record number of illegal crossings on the southern U.S. border, hitting almost 250,000 in December.
It's an issue that arouses a lot of passion, particularly on the grassroots right. Large majorities of the American people favor some sort of path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, as well as increasing the security of the border. But finding compromise on that has been elusive for decades.
In 2007, a bipartisan bill backed by Republican President George W. Bush failed in the Senate.
Legal immigration is one of the top concerns of the American people, and Congress's failure to act on it is a disappointment.
In 2013, a bill passed the Senate with a strong bipartisan margin, but died in the GOP-controlled House. In 2018, Trump proposed a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants who came to the U.S. as children, commonly referred to as dreamers, in exchange for funds for expanded barriers along the border with Mexico. A deal was never reached.
Again and again, these deals have fallen apart, and the once promising political careers of otherwise sort of conservatives in good standing, such as a Marco Rubio or a James Langford, have ended in tatters at the end of this process. Republicans just can't get to yes because this issue is so divisive and so toxic with their base.
Typically, Republicans have focused on increasing border security in legislation, while Democrats have prioritized legalizing undocumented immigrants. The 2024 Senate bill took a more limited approach.
The major difference in this negotiation versus previous rounds of bipartisan efforts at immigration reform is that they really were only looking at securing the border.
Because the GOP said it would not pass new aid for Ukraine unless the deal included a solution for the influx of migrants at the southern U.S. border, the two were linked in one package.
We've seen Ukraine aid become increasingly contentious, particularly among Republicans, in part because Donald Trump, who is most likely going to be the presidential nominee of the Republican Party, has crusaded against it. So politically, this was a way for Republicans to take an issue that was internally divisive, foreign aid, and pivot to an issue that, at least at the time, Republicans saw as unifying their party, the need to secure the border.
And Democrats were willing to pass a much more conservative bill than they had been in the past.
This country is crying out for the parties to stop fighting over immigration and just get something done.
Voters in polls, particularly independent voters, trust the Republicans by a large margin to deal with the border over the Democrats. So there was pressure on the Democrats to come to the table.
The result was a $118 billion bipartisan national security and border package. By the time the bill reached the Senate floor, even GOP lawmakers who had once backed the effort abandoned it.
Republicans in this situation ended up as sort of the dog that caught the car. Once they had gotten what they asked for, they found that they still couldn't agree to it for political reasons, in particular because Donald Trump, whose signature issue has always been immigration, came out against it and began campaigning against any kind of agreement on this bill.
We have no choice. Within moments of my inauguration, we will begin the largest domestic deportation operation in American history. No choice.
He hasn't always been successful in throwing his weight around on Capitol Hill, but when it comes to an issue like immigration, and when that issue coincides with the political campaign, and when it's an issue that a lot of people are paying attention to, it creates a situation where Republicans are definitely listening to what Trump has to say.
It's no good for the Republicans, and frankly, any Republican that signs it should be ashamed of himself or herself.
As cynical as he's accused of being, Trump's political calculation on this may be correct, that the worse the border situation gets, the better he does.
Targeting what they say are border failures by the Biden administration, Republicans in the GOP-led House impeached Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas on February 13th. after an embarrassing failure to oust him in a vote a week earlier.
Desperate times call for desperate measures. We had to do that. He has abdicated his responsibility, he's breached the public trust, and he's disregarded the laws Congress has passed.
Critics on both sides of the aisle said the charges amounted to policy disagreements or performance failings, but not impeachable crimes. Mayorkas' impeachment is seen as largely symbolic, as it is expected to hit an impasse in the Democrat-controlled Senate. While the 2024 border deal ultimately failed, the Senate did pass a $95.3 billion aid package for Ukraine and Israel, but its fate remains uncertain.
The Republican-led House will not be jammed or forced into passing a foreign aid bill that was opposed by most Republican senators and does nothing to secure our own border.
One thing that I will be watching with interest is how the Democrats position themselves going forward.
Every day between now and November, the American people are going to know that the only reason the border is not secure is Donald Trump and his MAGA Republican friends.
I'm interested to see what action the Democrats take policy-wise, and then also how they try to handle this as a political issue, given that it's such a significant weakness for the president and his re-election campaign, and given that it seems to be so top of mind for voters as we head into this election year.